The story opens in a forgotten countryside settlement where life moves slowly, and secrets age like damp wood. Inside a modest cottage, a woman named Magpie shares a quiet supper with two boys, Sam, her child by blood, and David, the stepson she's never fully warmed to. Nothing about the moment hints at the storm brewing beneath her calm face. Magpie has already decided that her husband, Howard, isn't going to live much longer. It isn't rage, it isn't passion, just a cold plan she's rehearsed in her mind. Howard returns at dusk, weary and unsuspecting. She hands him a cup of tea that looks harmless but isn't. Within minutes, his body begins slipping into a strange heaviness he can't explain. Magpie gently suggests a walk to collect firewood, leading him deeper into the tree line as the poison quietly unravels him. Away from them, we learn about Magpie's father, a stern pastor who rules the village's beliefs with an iron grip wrapped in scripture. To the townspeople, his voice is divine law. To him, the villagers are chosen servants of a destiny only he claims to understand. Back in the forest, Howard collapses onto a fallen log. Magpie stands over him, shaking. She wants the scene to look like a brutal accident, something no one could question. Fear paralyzes her until she gulps wine to steady her hands. With a burst of drunken resolve, she brings the blade down. The moment the deed is done, something impossible appears before her, an enormous figure with glowing eyes and twisted antlers, staring silently as if judging her soul. Whether it's real or guilt-born terror, Magpie can't tell. Soon after, chaos erupts in the village. The pastor is holding yet another sermon about purity and divine duty when Magpie stumbles into the gathering, drenched in blood. The entire crowd freezes. Even the pastor, usually unshakable, looks rattled. Later we meet John, a man the pastor trusts more than his own community. He keeps a close watch on Magpie, because publicly everyone's been told Howard died in a tragic mishap, nothing more. When Magpie visits her father with her sons, the pastor and John intercept them on the path. It becomes painfully clear that the pastor doesn't see his daughter as a human being. To him, rules and doctrine are sacred, compassion is not. Women in this village are treated like shadows, tolerated but never valued. And for years, that quiet cruelty has been crushing Magpie from the inside out. Magpie's father, the village pastor, had never been a man who took no for an answer. Years earlier, he had forced her into marrying Howard, a man she never wanted and never loved. Under his pressure, she accepted a life she had no choice in, a life that slowly drained the fire out of her. One morning, we see little Sam rushing into class late. When the teacher asks why, he innocently explains they'd gotten distracted talking about birds on the way. Before he can finish, David tries to correct him, but the pastor instantly snaps at David to stay quiet. He tells him he was speaking to his grandson, not him. The bitterness in his voice makes it painfully clear, David has never been welcome in this family, even though the pastor himself arranged Magpie's marriage knowing Howard already had a son. Everyone heads to their daily work, and the pastor quietly instructs John to keep an eye on Magpie and the boys. Later, we find Magpie and David working in the fields when Andrea, a sharp-tongued village woman, approaches. She mocks David for arriving late and says that's why he's stuck doing women's chores. Magpie cuts her off, refusing to let David be humiliated. Andrea fires back by bringing up Howard, insisting he was a good man and that the family was better off when he was around. Magpie snaps. She reminds Andrea that this good man nearly beat David to death once, something the entire village conveniently ignored. That's when the truth finally settles in the air. Howard wasn't a provider, he was a violent man who had made Magpie's life a quiet hell. In the middle of the argument, Andrea's daughter, Ursula, suddenly collapses. Andrea immediately turns on Magpie, accusing her of doing something unnatural. Unwilling to get pulled further into village drama, Magpie grabs David and walks away. Later that afternoon, while Magpie is tending to her work, Andrea returns, this time with her husband, Fred. Enraged, Fred threatens Magpie to stay away from their family. To them, she isn't just suspicious, she's dangerous, a witch capable of harming their daughter. He goes so far as to say he knows Howard's death wasn't an accident. Pastor's daughter or not, he claims he doesn't care, and then spits at her feet. Magpie stands there, humiliated but silent, knowing that in this village, fear and superstition always speak louder than truth. The moment Fred storms off, Magpie's vision blurs and that same antlered shadow, the creature she's been seeing since Howard died, flickers into view again. Instead of fear, she speaks to it as if it's something she understands. She tells the apparition she felt a deep, sharp pain inside Ursula earlier, almost like a warning. And with that, she turns away and leaves the clearing. Then the story shifts, revealing a secret no one in the village would ever dare imagine. Magpie has been involved in a forbidden relationship with David, the very stepson Howard once terrorized. It's messy, hidden, and charged with everything Magpie was denied: choice, affection, control. Meanwhile, the pastor confides in John. Whispers around the village have begun to twist into accusations. People are starting to believe Magpie is some kind of witch. Even Andrea has refused to work, claiming she's afraid of her. The pastor decides the solution is simple and cruel: Magpie needs to be remarried, and he wants John to be the one. He sends John to speak with David, calling him the eldest son, as if this decision belongs to him. The pastor plans to talk to Magpie himself. Elsewhere, Fred, drunk and stumbling, enters Ursula's room. What follows is sickening. He leans over his daughter with intentions that expose the monster he truly is. And suddenly, what Magpie sensed earlier becomes horrifyingly clear. Before Fred can act, the antlered creature appears again, this time fully, violently real. Without hesitation, it tears him down. Fred's life ends in the very room he meant to corrupt. By morning, the village is in chaos. Andrea, now a widow consumed by rage, becomes convinced Magpie had something to do with her husband's death. She storms through the village searching for her. In the woods, Magpie is hauling firewood when the pastor intercepts her. He scolds her for provoking Andrea, telling her she should have stayed quiet. Magpie doesn't back down this time. She coldly replies that Andrea only received what she deserved. The pastor snaps. His hand clamps around her throat in fury. When he finally releases her, he warns her to remember her place. But Magpie refuses to shrink anymore. She tells him he forced her into the hands of a monster, Howard, and that he destroyed her life long before anyone called her a witch. Then she delivers the words that shake even him: his days of playing God over this village are almost over. She walks away, leaving him rattled for the first time in years. Unbeknownst to both of them, Andrea has been hiding in the distance, watching everything. She follows Magpie silently through the trees, but what she sees next leaves her frozen in absolute shock. Before we can see what Andrea has stumbled upon, the narrative cuts away to John and David. John calls David outside, two men who were once as close as brothers until the chaos in their families drove a wedge between them. John explains why he's there: the pastor wants him to marry Magpie. The conversation grows heated quickly. David accuses John of being nothing more than the pastor's obedient servant, but John pushes back. He insists he isn't doing this for the pastor, he's doing it for survival. In their world, work means safety, and falling out of line means losing everything. Slowly, the tension melts, and the two men embrace, trying to recover the friendship they lost. As they talk, John admits that although the pastor is forcing the marriage, his heart is elsewhere. He has feelings for someone the pastor would never approve of. David laughs knowingly, saying he figured that out long ago. Then, oddly calm, David begins spreading a strange dark paste along John's neck and shoulders, almost ritualistically. The scene fades before John can question it. We next see John's entire body being coated in the same black substance. Magpie is there too, standing beside David, and in front of them stands the antlered creature, silent, immense, watching. It becomes clear that both Magpie and David have known this being far longer than anyone else. Magpie asks John a single pointed question: do you really want to spend your whole life living someone else's lie? Her words cut straight to the pastor's hollow, oppressive doctrine. Then the world blinks. The scene jumps to John's bedroom. He wakes with a jolt, drenched in sweat, unsure if the ritual was real or a vivid nightmare. But something inside him insists it wasn't a dream. He grabs a pencil and frantically sketches the creature's face before the memory fades. Elsewhere, Magpie is quietly working when a cluster of villagers suddenly appears, their expressions cold and determined. Panicking, she calls for David, but he's nowhere near. He's already been taken by Andrea's people. Andrea steps forward, demanding that Magpie come with them. Magpie is dragged to a desolate clearing where a rope hangs ominously from a crooked tree. The villagers are preparing to hang her. Before they can place the noose around her neck, the pastor arrives with young Sam by his side. For once, he steps between his daughter and danger. Furious, he strikes Andrea across the face and demands an explanation. Andrea shouts back that she's only doing what should have been done long ago. She accuses Magpie of killing her husband. And then she drops one more claim: last night she saw Magpie doing something unholy with her own eyes. The pastor's expression shifts. His voice drops. "What did you see?" he asks. And with that, the story slips into a flashback. Andrea was absolutely convinced. She'd been tracking McPhee, and what she witnessed was chilling. McPhee wasn't just near that terrifying entity, she was practically cradled in its lap, totally mesmerized, acting like she was under a heavy spell. Worse still, she was deliberately smearing that ominous, tar-like substance all over herself. It was a disturbing moment of realization: that black, paint-like residue was actually an excretion from the creature itself. When Andrea reported this to Pastor, she didn't hold back, confessing she'd seen her daughter in an intimate embrace with the thing. Pastor's face turned stone hard, his focus instantly shifting. "And Fred, your husband? What became of him?" he demanded. Andrea explained the horror. She'd found Fred mutilated, severed in 2 pieces in their room, and she blamed the very same creature McPhee was now intertwined with. McPhee immediately shouted down the accusation, declaring Andrea a liar. Andrea, disgusted, swore she wouldn't work alongside McPhee another day. But Pastor, seizing control, firmly declared that all infighting had to cease. Until the complete truth was uncovered, everyone was mandated to continue their duties. The setting abruptly shifted to the woods where the creature still lurked. Pastor then sought out his daughter, McPhee, who was burning up with a fever. "Tell me what you did to Fred," he pressed her. McPhee responded with a terrifying, manic laugh, declaring he got exactly what he deserved. When Pastor showed her the sketch John had drawn of the entity, McPhee instantly became frantic, insisting she had to go to it. Pastor, shaken, simply walked out, slamming and locking the door behind him. John arrived moments later, finally grasping that his own encounter wasn't a nightmare, it was horrifyingly real. Yet, Pastor feigned ignorance, claiming he knew nothing of the incident. Meanwhile, the village elders had turned against Pastor, placing immense pressure on him to act. He made a devastating decision: his own daughter would be punished, and the responsibility for carrying it out was handed to John. The villagers then dragged the bound McPhee to an isolated clearing, screaming epithets like sinner and witch. Ursula, however, remained silent, inwardly convinced that McPhee's actions were justified, not evil. When Pastor finally arrived, the crowd hushed. He stood before them, offering a chilling prayer, declaring that his daughter was now fully under the sway of the devil, rapidly transforming into the embodiment of evil itself. The pastor raised his hands toward the crowd, declaring that even Magpie's stepson had fallen under the same darkness corrupting the woods. He ordered the villagers to leave her tied where she was, insisting that divine judgment, not theirs, would decide her fate. Meanwhile, that thick, inky substance leaking from the creature continued to creep through the village like a living stain, swallowing everything it touched. The unsettling part was that the villagers, with all their rage and fanatic devotion, looked just as corrupted as the thing they feared. The story shifts to Ursula and her mother. Her mother tells her bluntly that Fred's death wasn't some tragedy, it was justice. His predatory eyes hadn't only followed Magpie, they had lingered on Ursula too, and the truth made Ursula's stomach twist. Back at the barn, John visited David, who had been locked up. John told him Magpie was waiting in the forest and that she had sent him. Desperate and hopeful, David followed him, only to realize, once they reached the clearing, that he had been deceived. The pastor had orchestrated everything. He wanted answers about the creature, and he wanted them from David personally. But David wasn't the same boy anymore. The creature's influence had hollowed him out, leaving him giggling uncontrollably with a wild, unhinged look in his eyes. Andrea, who had been watching from a distance, stepped forward and pointed out the place where she'd first seen the creature. David suddenly blurted out that none of them would ever be able to kill it. That was the spark. The pastor snapped, his pride punctured, his fury swallowing whatever restraint he had left. Without warning, he turned on Andrea and killed her where she stood. And once the blood was spilled, something inside him didn't stop. He turned to David next. Maybe he suspected something between David and his daughter, or maybe John had whispered that truth into his ear. Or maybe David's obsession with the creature was enough to make him intolerable. Either way, the pastor silenced him forever. Afterward, the pastor calmly told John the story they would give the villagers. The creature had killed Andrea, and David had been put down only because he attacked in a frenzy. John had no choice but to nod, survival demanded it. As they were about to leave, John caught a brief glimpse of the creature watching them from the shadows. The scene cut abruptly. We returned to the pastor tending to his feverish daughter. For once, the Ironheart leader looked genuinely scared. Everything he had done, locking her away, silencing Andrea, even the violent choices he made in the forest, stemmed from one thing: a twisted attempt to protect his child from the thing that had already claimed half the village. When Magpie finally snapped awake, her breath caught in her throat. She was locked inside a dim room, the walls closing in like a trap. For a moment, she thought she saw David in the corner, bloody, broken, begging her to help him. But the image flickered like a dying candle flame. It wasn't real. Or maybe it was something else, a message from whatever remained of him. As she blinked the vision away, John appeared beside her. The first thing she asked, almost screamed, was where David had gone. John didn't answer. Instead, he fired a question back at her, his voice trembling. "What did you do to me that night?" He explained that ever since that black slime had touched his skin, his body felt wrong. His mind felt wrong. The creature kept appearing in flashes, lurking in the corner of his eye, breathing behind his ear. Even the earth beneath their feet felt unnatural now. The soil had turned sick. The entire village was slowly being swallowed by the same black rot oozing from the creature's body, like the world itself was rotting from the inside out. Then John finally confessed. His voice cracked when he said it. He killed David. Magpie staggered back as if he'd slapped her. She didn't believe him. She didn't want to. But John kept talking, rambling about a fear growing inside his chest, about the feeling that he wasn't going to survive whatever was happening to him. And then he asked her the question that truly cut her open: how was she still alive when she'd touched the creature directly? Magpie shoved him away and stormed out of the room, fury and grief swirling together like a storm. Outside, she saw something moving in the distance, David. Or the ghost of him. She ran until she reached what was left of his body, hanging limp with a wooden sign tied to him that read, "Heretic." The sight shattered something inside her. She whispered apologies through her sobs, as if his spirit had dragged her there just to hear them. John was searching for her, calling her name through the dying forest. But Magpie didn't hear him. She had already walked straight back to the creature. John found her there moments later, submerged in that black, living liquid as if the darkness had claimed her completely. Before he could speak, she lunged at him with an animal's fury, slashing his throat in one swift, merciless motion. His body collapsed at her feet. And watching it all from the shadows was the pastor, frozen in place, witnessing the horror his own beliefs had nurtured. The pastor had finally run out of excuses, out of faith, out of the comforting lies he'd been feeding himself for years. He had just watched his own daughter tear a man apart like she belonged to something ancient and merciless. Whatever she had become, it terrified him. In a burst of rage and panic, he shoved her to the ground and screamed that her birth had cost her mother's life, words he had buried for years, now spit out like poison. He raised his hands to kill her. But he never got the chance. The creature slid out of the darkness like a nightmare coming to collect its dead. It lunged at the pastor, ripping him down before he could even gasp. Magpie didn't scream. She didn't run. She just laughed, wild, broken laughter echoing through the clearing. And in that moment, it became clear that the pastor wasn't the righteous man he pretended to be. The rumors that haunted the village, that he used his authority for things far darker than sermons, didn't seem like rumors anymore. This whole village was rotten. Their secrets, their cruelty, their hypocrisy, all of it had been festering for years. The creature wasn't a monster, it was a reflection, the shape of their sins made real. And then the story returned to the beginning, to that old poem whispered like a prophecy. The moon lived alone, longing for company. In that longing, the sun was born. Light spread across the world, but every light casts a shadow. And something ancient had been waiting in that shadow, untouched for ages, until now. Those words were never about the moon or the sun. They were about Magpie. Her whole life had been soaked in loneliness and pain. Her father wasn't a guardian, he was a jailer. A man who used religion to control her, to silence her, to trap her. And her community wasn't any better. In a place where women were treated like property, her fate had been sealed the day they forced her into marriage with Howard. A marriage that was supposed to fix her, to tame her, to break her spirit. Instead, it pushed her straight into the darkness that finally answered back. Howard, the man who was supposed to be her son, her protector, revealed himself to be just another source of cruelty, a cage disguised as a husband, whose violence and obsession slowly crushed Magpie's spirit until the only light in her life came from his son, the boy who offered her the care and warmth she had never known. That bond, fragile and fleeting, was shattered almost as soon as it formed, and in that heartbreak, Magpie realized the truth. In a village built on hypocrisy, rigid dogma, and the oppression of women, she would never be safe, never be allowed love, and never have a voice. The weight of centuries of abuse and fanaticism, the generations of silent suffering, pressed down on her until she no longer fought, no longer hoped for salvation from the people around her, only from the darkness itself, the very force the village had unknowingly nurtured through its sins. The creature she embraced was not a demon from elsewhere but the living embodiment of the community's collective corruption, the violence, the lies, the greed, the misogyny, and the blind reverence for a morality that justified cruelty. This is how our story ends here.